go. Welcome everyone. Welcome to our audio community plugin here at Avid. My name's Greg Strike-Chin. I'm the audio evangelist for Avid. It is a pleasure to be with everyone today. I hope everyone's doing well, keeping safe. We've been really lucky to be doing these over the past few months, and we want to thank all of you wherever you might be in the world. Thank you so much for joining us for these. We've had some really great topics and guests, and today is no exception. We're really excited for today. I cannot wait to get this started. So we're going to get it started, but before we do, just a little bit of housekeeping. So let's just jump right into that. So obviously, we're streaming this session, this webinar, across all of our social media platforms. Hopefully, you've registered and you're actually here with us in our Zoom room, because actually, if you've registered, there's a lot more content and stuff you'll be able to get. It's certainly a lot easier as far as handling all the Q&A if you're here in the room. But of course, if you're not able to, we're happy to have you join us, whether you're joining us on any one of our other social media platforms from Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. So again, welcome to everybody. But for those of you here in the webinar, we do have a Q&A section at the end of the session. So that, there's a couple of different ways to handle that. But before even getting into that, so we've got a few guests today. So Gil Gowing, our amazing solution specialist, and one of our most knowledgeable people here, will be kind of moderating and hosting this session today, along with Colin and Dirk from McDSP and Plugin Alliance. So you're going to have a few people that you're going to be able to see, and they're going to have a discussion going back and forth. So what I recommend doing is, if you're here in Zoom, go ahead on the top hand corner, just go ahead and ensure that you've got gallery view selected rather than speaker view. Speaker view, once folks go back and forth, and we've got a very spirited set of guests today, and they're going to be talking with each other, so that might be a little nauseating kind of looking at it that way. So I recommend looking at it in gallery view. Additionally, just to make sure, we've got some other moderators, myself, Jeff Komar here. We're going to be in the background fielding some of the questions as well. There might be a few other folks here in the chat. So make sure that you hide non-video participants. That way you're only going to be focused on the people with their cameras on, in this case, our guests, and along with Gil. So that'll help you out there. As far as being able to submit your questions, if you're here registered here in the Zoom, we've got a Q&A section, so that you just click on the Q&A icon, type your question. Please make it as detailed as you can. Jeff and I will be covering as much of that as we can, but of course we will be fielding questions and getting them over, as many as we possibly can, over to our guests to answer. Now, we probably won't be able to get to every single question. We'll do our very best to get to as many as we can. Now, additionally, we don't want to leave out anyone who's participating and viewing this on any of our social media platforms. So if you've got questions there and you want to get them answered, we've got moderators on all of our platforms as well. So thank you to the team, for the worldwide team, for helping us out with that. So please go ahead and ask your questions there. The moderator team there will go ahead and compile those and send them over to us. Again, we will do our very best to get to as much as we can. We can't promise that we'll get to everything. And of course, this is live. We ask that you be respectful of our guests, of each other, and let's just have a great time. We've got some really amazing information we're going to go into today. I cannot wait to get into that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Gil Gowing, one of our managers for the product specialist, solution specialist team based in the US. And he is going to be our head moderator and host. So Gil, where are you?
I'm here. Hello.
All righty. Awesome. Gil, good luck. Have a great time. And we'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, Greg, for the introduction. Want to say thank you all to everybody being here today. I think, like Greg said, we've got a couple of guys that are really big industry leaders when it comes to audio here in our industry, and we're very, very excited and privileged to have them here with us today. So actually, without further ado, I want to go ahead and bring them on. We have Dirk Ulrich is the owner and CEO of Brainworx and Plugin Alliance. Hello, Dirk.
Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
And we also have Colin McDowell, founder, CEO, and CTO of McDSP. Hello, Colin.
Gil, it's good to see you.
Good to see you sort of as well. And I swear my camera was working earlier.
2 minutes ago, everybody. 2 minutes ago, it was like,
right.
Hey, Gil, talking. Okay.
We'll figure this out in a minute. So actually, what I'd like to do real quick while I kind of work on my technical issues is maybe have you guys just do a brief introduction of yourselves and kind of give us a little background on your company. So Dirk, let's go ahead and start with you.
Okay. Well, in 2005, roughly, I started with the first plugin adventures with Brainworx back in the days in Germany. And before that, Brainworx was actually founded as a music production company. So I worked on real stuff before I got into the plugin world. And then many people will know the BX Digital plugin, which was the first thing we did. And actually, Avid was our first partner with this plugin. I remember that you guys put it in a massive pack, I think in 2007, 6 or 7. And that really launched my little company at that time. And then over time, we hired 1 or 2 developers, and we worked on more plugins. We started working with our first partner, SPL, and then more analog companies. And in 2011, we had grown the business quite a bit at that time. We decided that we wanted all the plugins we made on one unified website. And I also wanted to work and live in the US at that time. So I decided to launch the Plugin Alliance. And we went live January 2nd, 2012. And over time, we added more than 30 partner companies to the Alliance. A lot of the plugins are still being made by the Brainworx team in Germany with what we call logo deals. So we work with SPL or MPEG or SSL. And the Brainworx team makes these plugins, and then they're branded with the original company. And and that's what the Plugin Alliance is all about, having one unified licensing system, one unified shop, bundles. And this is basically how I started. And I guess if you look up Plugin Alliance today, you will either know the company already or you will see what this is all about. We basically have everything from heavy metal guitar amps to 3D headphone mixing, whatever you need.
Awesome. Man, that is awesome. Colin, give us a little bit of background on yourself and McDSP.
McDSP is just a ton of fun. I'm not a good musician. Also a terrible hockey player, if you have to know. But somewhere along the way, I figured out that if I was in the studio with a band, I was good at knowing, not always how to use the equipment, but I could figure out how it worked. And I just turned into an engineering degree. I worked at DigiDesign for a while, worked on Pro Tools and some other stuff and some plugins there. And then at some point, I decided to start my own thing instead. And been doing McDSP for 22 years. But like you, Gil, I'm 35, so everything's great. And it's, I guess, my nature is I'm kind of obsessive compulsive. So I think about something and I just think about it and think about it. I'll even dream about it. My wife can tell you crazy stories of me waking up and going, oh, I fixed a bug. Oh, even up? No, I just had a dream and I fixed the bug in my dream. And now I'm going to go, yep, I was right. Anyway, that's a ramble, I guess. McDSP, we make plugins. We also have done more recently some programmable analog ideas of this thing called the APB. We've been doing plugins for the Pro Tools platform for 21 or 22 years. Tape simulator, EQ, mixing console, stuff like that. It's just a lot of fun. The customers are great, and it's like making Doritos. People always want more, so we're glad to do it, and we'll keep doing it as long as we can. And thanks for having us.
Well, we're very, very happy that you're both here. So maybe a little bit more detailed. I mean, both of you, I think, kind of mentioned in your introductions, kind of where it all kind of started. But why did you decide you wanted to get into actually making plugins? Start with you, Colin. What was the motivation to kind of dive into this world of virtual processing?
Since I'm not exactly a smart person, and I will have to share with you that both my parents expressed grave concern about my well-being as like a functional adult when I would grow up. But when I was 10 years old, somebody on my soccer team, the dad worked for Moog Music, and he gave me a little micro Moog synthesizer. And I took it home when I was 10. And in a day, I figured it out. I blew up my dad's stereo, and that was like the thing. And my dad would come home. My dad's like a signal processing engineer. And he's like, hey, Colin, I heard you blew up my prize stereo, the only nice thing in the entire house, and you destroyed it. Yeah, I did that. And he said, what did you do? And then idiot me explained to my dad how a synthesizer worked, not really knowing what I was talking about. And my dad was like, what? Honey, he's not an idiot. We should keep him. You know, it was that kind of moment. And so, and then I was 10. My dad took one of his engineering books from college. My dad's a smart guy. And he said, in this book, show me a low pass filter. Oh, okay, this one. And this is the frequency, and this is the resonance. And he's like, great. It all just made sense. And so ever since then, I've been just a nut job for, you know, synthesizing sounds or making sounds. And when plugins came along, I was like, oh, this is great. I can write software just to do the signal processing part. I mean, who wants to write a DAW? That's like a ton of work and takes teams of people and years to develop. Oh, it's a nightmare. Sorry, guys. But you know, plugins is great because you can make the one thing, it does its thing, and it does that one, and you can just, I don't know. So that's, I guess, why I do it. It's just a lot of fun, and there are a lot of people out there that really want to have new sounds or explore new ways of mixing their music, and so that's what I do. Was that okay, Gil? That was kind of a that was a great explanation. Really, just, you know, it's interesting to hear how people get involved in all of this. So kind of the same thing with you, Dirk. I mean, you know, you talked a little bit about kind of how Brainworx got started. I remember meeting you at a NAMM show when you had first done your first EQ plugins, and we were talking about getting it put on the center section of D-Control, and that's always kind of stuck with me, that you were, I mean, how excited you were to get into that. So a little bit more maybe about, kind of talk about how you decided you wanted to get involved in the industry like this.
I actually never really decided I wanted to get into it. All of a sudden I was into it. I was, like I said, I was working out of my small studio back in the days in Germany, producing local bands, some of which by now have become famous in Germany, like the Broilers. It's a German band. You wouldn't know them in the US, but they play the big halls now, big festivals in Germany. And we worked together for 11 years. And out of that studio work, I met a lot of people, and I was always fascinated by mastering studios. And so I went to a professional mastering studio, and I saw their mid-side EQ that they had built basically by using, I think it was a Massenburg GML 8200 EQ and a separate MS matrix, and they hooked it up. And I was really fascinated by what you could do with it. And then I had a friend who had a little shop, and he basically said, well, I can build you one of these EQs, and we can put an MS matrix inside the EQ, so you don't need all the gear, because my budget at that time was very limited. I would not have been able to just buy a GML EQ and the matrix and all that stuff. So we started working on this almost like just like a fun project. And then I ran into the guys from Creamware who were close to us in Germany, and they had this software toolkit where you could just build your own little plugin, almost like a reactor thing, I guess, these days. And I built an MS EQ inside that system, and the guys went crazy when I showed them what I did and said, well, why don't you make a plugin out of this? That was the famous question. Why don't you make a plugin out of this? And I said, well, I don't know how to make plugins. And they said, well, we can help you. We can make that a commercial plugin. And so we did together, and they took me to a NAMM show. I helped them on their booth, and I always wanted to go to a NAMM show because when I was young, I worked in a guitar store, and I always heard about NAMM, and we sold guitars and amps basically. And so here I was at a NAMM show, and then somebody with a DigiDesign shirt back then, not an Avid shirt, came to our little booth down in Hall E, in the basement, and said, well, that's really cool. Could we have this for Pro Tools? And I said, well, yeah, I mean, I'd be interested. I have no idea how that would work. And he said, well, you should talk to my boss. And that was my introduction to Ed Gray, who I love to this day. I mean, he was so great. I was a nobody basically back then with a really small, it wasn't even a company. I mean, it was me and an idea basically. And so they gave me a developer contract and an NDA on the trade show, and invited me for a meeting the Monday after the show, and all of a sudden I was sitting next to George Messenberg and the guys from Waves and I don't know, a lot of companies, because they were introducing the new Intel Mac back in that meeting. And basically they asked me, can you make this TDM? And I said, sure, I can. So how long does it take? And I said, well, it took me 6 weeks to build the first version in that Creamer system, probably another 6 weeks, because I know what I'm doing now and it's okay. And I said, okay, we'll send you our SDK. And when I came back to Germany from that trade show, they sent me the SDK, and I was super disappointed because it was just a few Word documents. I thought some text files, .h or whatever. And to this day, I'm not a programmer. So I opened these files and I said, well, I guess I need help. And then I reached out to some programmers, and we converted this concept basically to TDM, and then Avid put it in the massive pack, and it kind of became its own thing. And yeah, here we are a few years later. My companies now have 50 employees between Brainworx and Plugin Alliance. So from being on the NAMM show with just me and an idea to here, that's quite the journey, I think, in 15 years or 16 years, 14 years maybe.
Wow, that's awesome. Really, I think it's real interesting to hear kind of how people kind of get their start in all of this, and it's it's I think very cool how both of you have kind of come up, just kind of being interested in things, and just decided to make things happen and to where you are today. So that's really, really nice. One thing about both of your companies I'd like to kind of bring up is that obviously you both develop for AAX as kind of the whole platform, but both of your companies also do a lot with our AAX DSP platform, which is the plugin platform that we use on our HDX DSP accelerated PCIe cards. Maybe Colin, why don't you give us a little kind of background on why you think that is an important part of kind of what you do and how you develop plugins?
Okay. Well, for those of us who are a little bit older, prior to the AAX platform was this thing called TDM, which you got to write assembly code and do embedded signal processing that way. And that was great. And some of us, me, got very good at it. And so when Avid said, we have this new system called AAX, and you'll have to start from ground up. It's going to be great. And that was kind of like a, what? But we checked it out, and it was pretty cool. And it had a lot of things that the older system couldn't do. And also the way Avid set it up is that it was possible to make it so that all the code that would run on these TI DSP chips and the AAX hardware could still translate and work like on a native platform. And so when we realized that, we thought that was pretty smart on Avid's part, because we could support the DSP stuff, the AAX DSP plugin format and AAX native or any other native format, but we could do so in a way where we still had the embedded system support. And I guess just to be, I'm the nerdy guy, I'm sorry. The embedded system will make you think. You can't just go out and allocate, tons of memory and put your loops in and have like lots of conditional statements in your algorithm that slows it down. It'll just barf it back at you, or take 30 minutes to compile, because the compiler's going, what is he doing? This sucks. So that was great, because then it made sure that we always wrote code in some efficient manner. It made total sense. The platform sounds great. AAX as a system still, to me, is like the best embedded real-time system for audio on the planet. It has all the higher precision data types that you need. The way it does the multi-threading of the control updates and the DSP actual algorithm, it's really smart. It just makes sense to support it, and it's actually kind of fun, because when it works on the DSP chips, it's going to work everywhere. So it's like, yay! Sorry, that was too long. I'm done.
Awesome. Dirk, anything, do you have maybe a different take, or what's your idea behind the AAX DSP platform?
Yeah, so I started actually still when TDM was a thing, and just like Colin, I mean, I'm nowhere near as technical as he is. Like I said, I'm not a developer at all. I wrote one line of TDM code in my life, and basically one of our programmers told me what to type. I said I want to contribute something to our framework, and that's how that happened. But I remember somebody from Avid back in the days telling me, well, if you want to be in the massive pack, it has to be TDM, and it basically separates the boys from the men. That was their take back then on this whole thing. And so I take it, it's pretty challenging to program TDM codes. That's what I hear from everybody, but super efficient once you have it. I always was a fan, I'm coming more from the user perspective, I was always a fan of the DSP stuff because it means low latency. And when I recorded a lot of bands, I had a huge recording room where actually 2 stages in there. I could record drum kits and full bands. And so being able to track with plugins activated, even many years ago when computers weren't as fast as they are maybe today. So the whole TDM thing made a lot of sense back then. And the whole, just like Colin said, the DSP, AAX DSP system now makes a lot of sense because it's well integrated. I also love being able to flip between the native and the DSP version. If I just work on my MacBook, I can still work on my session. And because Brainworx and Plugin Lines make a lot of console plugins, guitar amps, bass amps, a lot of stuff that's real-time relevant, we love supporting the DSP platform, and our philosophy is basically anything that we can fit on these chips, we will make as AAX DSP. And somebody from Avid told me the other day that we now have more AAX DSP plugins even than Avid. So I guess we have a pretty big selection at this point. We now have 120 plugins on the Plugin Alliance. Some are made by what we call third parties, external people. Most of these companies don't do the AAX DSP, but I would guess that we have 60 or 70 AAX DSP titles, and it's all the brands from SSL and MPEG and a lot of different things.
Awesome, that's great. So kind of keeping in this plugin vein, want to actually give just a call out. We are taking questions. If you want to pull up the Q&A window and be able to ask questions, we will see those. So we want to make sure that we start getting some of those. So we actually did have a question come in from one of the attendees. So the first one would be kind of in this kind of plug-in platform vein, and the user wants to know, he'd like to know what Dirk and Colin think of Apple's upcoming CPUs, the move away from Intel chips, and the way this will change native plugins and overall DAW performance. So Colin, you want to maybe take that first?
Sure. Well, it'll be fun, an adventure, kind of like when Apple went away from their other chip to the Intel chip, like back in, I don't know, was that 2004, 2005, the G5 to the Intel chips. Woo, that dates me. I'm still 32, by the way. Okay, moving on. I think the new Apple processors will probably be good. I mean, they get a lot of good performance out of the current computers they make. And so Apple, if they can make their own chip and do a better job, then that's what it'll be. I think from the audio community, you can expect a lot of peer pressure from all the developers, Dirk's companies, ours, lots of other ones, who when Apple introduces and provides some of these development systems to work on with a new Apple processor on it, that we're just going to, try to grind it to a halt and see what it can do. So I think it'll be good. I think overall DAW performance will be good. The only thing I'd speculate about is that I think some of the driver support, not that it won't be as good, it'll just, there'll be some like learning, so like, oh, this driver works this way. This is how we manage this type of interrupt, things like that. And people will figure that stuff out. Again, just imagine a bunch of like smart people in the same room trying not to look dumb. It's perfect, the perfect storm. Everyone, oh yeah, I can fix that. Oh, I can do that. Like Dirk will go from, I can do it in 6 weeks. Well, I can do it in 6 days because I can. And he will, because he just, so like I said, a part of the question is how long will it really take before things hit the market? That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for that. This is my first time porting to a whole new computer platform during a global pandemic. So I think there'll be some things that might take a little bit longer from Apple's side of it or any other third-party developer's side of it. But I think it'll all, in the end, come out pretty good. Again, just it's the peer pressure thing. A bunch of smart people in the room trying to solve a problem. Nobody wants to let anybody else down. So I think it'll go really well.
Awesome. Dirk, kind of what are your thoughts about this change coming up?
The technical team between the Brainworx and Plugin Alliance combination is really the Brainworx team, and we try to always monitor the upcoming trends and the new technology. We developed over the last 15 years, we developed our own plugin framework, so we're not using Juice or something that most, I don't know if Colin uses it, but most other companies do. So basically, if there's a new OS or new drivers or new chipsets or whatever it is, we always have to make sure that we will fit it into our system. But on the other hand, we control that system. So we've been the first to release, I think, AAX actually with our full range of plugins when AAX became a thing. And there was a coincidence, but it happened around the time when we launched the Plugin Alliance. So it gave us a great chance back then to say, you know what, we're changing to the Plugin Alliance. We're leaving. Also at that time, we were still working with Pace and iLog, and we decided to design our own DRM basically. And so we moved and we used the AAX transition as basically as part of this. Now, if Apple comes up with new chips, I assume, I mean, computers are not getting slower or worse usually, even if there's a bad release.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, even if one chipset is faulty or doesn't do what everybody's dreaming of, then the next one will fix it. And I guess if you look at it maybe on a 5-year scale, things will just be faster, smoother, and obviously Apple could maybe integrate a lot of things that that makes audio and video editing more fun and faster.
Awesome. So I think coming up, there's going to be like both of you said. I mean, it's going to get faster, but there's definitely going to be some challenges as we kind of try to get there and navigate through these new waters. I mean, I think the industry's seen this before, like Colin had brought up back in the big changeover from the older G4 G5 chips to Intel back in 2004 2005, and this will be kind of that same thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that all kind of pans out. Next thing I would like to kind of ask is just get some idea of maybe some unique examples of what maybe your plugins or your company kind of brings to the table. We'll start with you on this one, Dirk. Just what are some of the unique things that Plugin Alliance and Brainworx do?
Okay, well, when I started, I was doing a lot of masking work, and I was really fascinated by the mid-side technology. So we did a lot of plugins in the beginning, especially that I think BX Digital was probably the first mid-side EQ at that time as a plugin. And there's a lot of mid-side technology in our German heritage. I mean, all the old mastering studios in Germany, the EMI stuff that was in Germany also, they had this built in. So that's how it started. And that was maybe unique and innovative for the time. Over time, we've upped our game a little bit. I mean, we have mid-side in pretty much every EQ compressor now, just as an add-on because it's handy. The thing that I'm most proud of is probably because we're doing a lot of analog modeling, is that we got a patent issued just about a year ago for our TMT, which is the tolerance modeling technology. And that's basically our approach to modeling analog gear and keeping in mind that no two channels, even on an EQ or compressor or on a console, sound exactly the same. I mean, yes, most professional companies work within specs and they may even be tight, but this whole experience of having plugins now that have 72 different channels, that have slightly different left and right channels on stereo pairs, even if you're using a compressor in link mode, you will get just ever so slightly different attack and release times for left and right channels, the noise and the phasing, everything is just a bit more vivid. And I believe in this thing. It's our best selling range of plugins. So obviously, I believe that a lot of people like it. Maybe not it's not for everybody, but it's definitely something that I'm proud of because getting your first patent issued, that was a big deal for me. And yeah. And also the other thing maybe that we do different than other companies is in our guitar modeling, the way that we handle impulse responses is not just capturing the microphone and the cabinet and the preamp and then adding some filters that people have to adjust, or even blending the microphones. We do complete sessions, several days of sound check sessions, basically with every single amp in our studio in Germany, which is equipped with a real Neve console and V76 preamps and Millennia and SPL and SSL. We pretty much have every preamp that we believe we need. And so we actually combine up to 12 different microphones. We blend them together, we filter them, we EQ them, and then we put final, we call them recording chains into the plugin. So you just select one of the roughly 100 choices, and you don't have to fiddle with the individual microphones. And some people tell us they would prefer if they could actually do that, but there's a lot of other plugins where you can do that. So if that's what you want, and maybe this is not the approach for you, you can switch our IRs off basically and use some other IR collection also if you want that. But that's, I always like that approach, because I just know, okay, with this amp, with the diesel metal amp, I use number 13 or 17, and that's my sound, and I don't have to tweak mics, and I don't even have to know anything as a guitar player about which microphone and the distance and the angle, and it just basically sounds good straight off the box. So these are a few examples where we try and think a little bit different maybe than the average of what most other companies do. And I'm pretty sure Colin can say a lot about that, because I really respect his freaky mind and his unique approach to things. So I'm sure, yeah, we'll hear some more from Colin about this.
Well, there you go, Colin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you think are some of your unique offerings from McDSP?
Okay, well, first, Dirk, congratulations on the patent. That is a huge accomplishment. It's very impressive. So that's pretty cool. Okay, sorry, the Geek Bro Fest is over. Okay, fine. Gil's question, what makes our plugins cool and unique? I guess I like listening to what other people do in music production, and then just decide what parts of that made it sound good and try to make a product out of it. So, for example, well, you know, folks, once we had this thing called Filter Bank, that was like an EQ filter thing. This thing called Compressor Bank, that was cool, compressors and stuff. And then we sat down at the 2002 trade show with this guy named Gil Gowing, and he said, that's really cool. You should make like a channel strip for this new control surface I'm working on. I can't tell you about it. What should I call it, Gil? Channel G? Yeah, that's a good ring to it. Yeah, okay, fine. And so we did. So that was a cool thing, because, you know, when Avid made like the big icon, you know, D-command or D-control surfaces, but we made a plugin that just looked like the center section of that control surface, so people could go, oh, I see how it maps out, because the positioning is the same. So that was a lot of fun. Other things we've done, like, oh geez, a Futzbox, which is this crazy plugin that just, you know, you want your audio to go to like a speaker or a cell phone or a car stereo, and it has a bunch of other distortion characteristics to it. We made it for the post-production crowd for doing, like, you know, film and television, but then a lot of music people got a hold of it because they thought it'd be really cool when I'm doing this song about ditching my boyfriend. Yeah, and the last chorus, I want to make it sound like I'm leaving him a voicemail on his voicemail thing. Yeah, and people go, all right. So that's actually part of my Futzbox is more popular than the post-production. Other things, like we did the 6060, there's a whole line of like 6,000 plugins from us, because, you know, I can't, you know, once I find a good idea, I just can't put it down. So like the 6060 is like the culmination of all that. It's a bunch of little modules, like in a 6-bay slot, and you can mix and match them all together, like split the signal path, do all kinds of wild and crazy stuff. But it's just cool, because you can just, if you have a compressor in there that you like, and you're like, oh, well, what would another compressor sound like? You can just change the different compressor modules up, but it will keep all the relative settings, so you can just hear what the different kinds of compressors are. Like someone like Dirk, where he has like every mic pre he thinks he needs, and it's probably true, and then he can switch between them all, and that's great, you know. But the average mortal like me or somebody else is like, well, I don't really have all the compressors I really want. I try to tell my wife that all the time. She doesn't believe me, but it's true. Anyway, so, you know, to be able to switch through a bunch of different compressor models but keep the relative settings, that's a cool feature in the 6060 and other products like that. We had this thing called the dialogue processor, which I never intended to do, but this gentleman named Mike Minkler, who is pretty adamant about making a software version of this piece of hardware he had custom made for himself. And we did that. That was really cool, because it actually wound up getting us an Emmy. I don't think that anything that we did with the SA2 dialogue processor was particularly more amazing or less amazing than anybody else's plugins. Just happened to fit a certain function and form factor for a certain set of customers, and a lot of our customers are, you know, our best advocates. You know, I kind of ramble. I'm a good talking head. Sometimes I tell a funny joke, but, you know, some other customers say, I like this McDSP stuff. We should give him an Emmy. See to it. Okay. And then it happens that we just, you know, okay. So that was pretty neat. And then I guess the last thing would be like this APB thing, the programmable analog, you know, the patent that Dirk talked about. Yeah, there's all this variability or this mojo in the analog domain. And so we've been working on it for a number of years, and we shipped it last summer in July of 2019. The APB, it's a programmable analog processor. All the processing inside is analog, but it's controlled from a plugin. It's been a few years of my life that have been put into that, and along with other engineers who also are very, very smart, probably smarter than me. And we just come up with a thing that's fun to program, and it's a new kind of thing to work on, and we're having a good time with that and the rest of what we do. I don't know. I guess I think our plugins are pretty cool, but I think if you ask me why it makes them special and stuff, it's all the people that use them and do things I could never do. And they say, I use it on this track. And I'm like, wow, I use it on this movie. Whoa, I use it on this television show. Really? Oh, crap, I can hear that. Oh, yeah. And I've ruined so many movies for my wife and children when they go, oh, this is the scene where we use it. Dad, shut up and just, sorry, I'm sorry. Just sit down. It's so awesome. So if that's what makes them special, it's all the cool people that use them. There you go.
Awesome.
This, by the way, I can totally relate to when customers send me emails saying we've used it on this record in this movie. It still to this day gives me goosebumps. So yeah, it's really
cool. Yeah.
That absolutely is incredible. Let me see here. Looking at my list of questions that are coming in. Something that's a little more technical, but I think even, you know, as a non-programmer, because of Dirk's background as a guitarist, I think he'll be able to kind of possibly talk to this as well. So actually, I'll start with him. So the question is, how important is it for plugin processing that is non-linear to use internal upsampling? Does this help reduce digital aliasing distortion?
So I'm laughing because that's like the #1 topic in all of our Facebook groups and on gear slots. And at some point I even made a comment said that's my last comment about it, but I'm happy to say something here. People sometimes think that our plugins or other plugins do or don't upsample. And I can tell you, we got this. I mean, our team will upsample not the whole plugin. Some plugins have like a switch where you can go 8 times or 16 times or 4 times upsampling for the whole algorithms. And that's maybe, for some plugins, that may be a good idea. We decided we do it differently, and we actually upsample the parts that need to be upsampled internally. But then there's other parts where we don't need upsampling, and this is basically to make sure that we reduce the CPU and DSP load. And because also, of course, people want to get a lot of plugins on one chip, or being able to run a lot of plugins on their old 2015 MacBook or whatever. So it is a concern to us. And for example, one of our ex-developers who's now, he moved to Berlin, I think he works with Avid now. He developed the Massenburg filter, which is basically a digital filter that behaves like an analog filter frequency-wise and without upsampling. So we use a lot of clever tricks to get away without upsampling, but if we feel we need to, then obviously we do it. And then there's people posting YouTube videos of where they show that if you raise the signal by 248 decibels, then you actually see some aliasing and some artifacts and all that stuff. And basically our replies, don't worry, it's not a real issue. I mean, our developers showed me guitar and plugin talking about guitars where they shut off the oversampling, and then if I take the high E string and bend it on the 23rd fret or something, then you can actually hear almost like a police siren going the other direction because the aliasing is so obvious that it's noticeable and audible. And if stuff like this would happen, we would never put it in a plugin. But I'm not a believer in that everything has to be upsampled 16 times just to make sure you're working in the 485,000 kilohertz range to make sure plugin works as analog. And then you look at a V76 microphone preamp that everybody loves, and they basically shut off everything over 15K just to make sure that everything sounds nice and warm. So it's a bizarre discussion basically, and I'm sure there's people who are more knowledgeable, like Colin, I guess, about the technical stuff, but from a user perspective, and when people just assume, they read somewhere that upsampling is the thing, and then they think because we or other companies don't have that switch, it's not happening. It's just not true. I mean, internally, absolutely, we go really high as we need to, basically.
So what's your take on all of that, Colin?
Pretty much what Dirk just said. You only need to upsample when you need to. You shouldn't do it everywhere. It's just wasting CPU cycles. And yeah, you have, it's like as a person mixing a track, you know, you have to choose the important parts to manage. You cannot put everything on everything, because you're just going to grind your CPU to a halt, or you're just going to make a mess. Imagine getting a recall. I put 60 plugins on every track. It's not going to, you're just going to make your life a living hell every time someone recalls a mix or you decide to change a mix here on your own. And so Dirk's approach is the correct, I 100% agree. The correct engineering approach is to upsample when a portion of the algorithm needs it. When other parts do not, you don't, because you're just going to spin computer cycles. And at some point, if your plugin is CPU intensive and other people's aren't, you know, when the session grinds to a halt, it's your plugin doing it, not somebody else's, and that's not good. So yeah, what Dirk said, 100%.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. It's, as a guitar player, kind of what you said, Dirk, I remember back in the early days when processing was just kind of coming back in the late 80s and early 90s, and doing that where you would get on that high E string and do some bending and hear the crazy aliasing noise, the siren, and it's just like, just so off-putting, and that's always been at least a criteria of mine, is you go through and you check out those type of plugins and make sure they don't do that. And it really is good that we are at a point to where, you know, we have these great plugins that model all these awesome analog components and things, but and really do have that feel that they are what they are from the analog world. And it, you know, it's definitely come a long way from when a lot of this stuff started, you know, 20-25 years ago. But it definitely exciting to know, you know, kind of what you guys think about these things, and how you actually put these things into practice with the actual products that you bring out. Got a few more questions. Actually been told that we are not going to be able to go past the hour, that we're going to have to shut it down. We've got some other webinars coming up that we'll need to get to, but I do have a couple more questions that we want to get to here real quick. So a quick question, we'll start with you, Colin. How would someone get started to develop a plugin?
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Okay. Not everybody likes it, but Juice, J-U-C-E, they make a developer kit. I think it's freely downloadable. You can like build a plugin from their SDK that'll work on every platform, AAX, AU, VST, VST3. That's a great place to start. You may or may not care for some of the way the Juice folks code up a plugin, or maybe you do, but that's a great place to start to get a handle on, okay, like, you know, volume control or something like that. Don't make it, your first plugin should be like, if it just passed audio, that's a win. Otherwise, make it just a volume control, something simple like that, just something so you kind of get that. That's a great way to get started. I'd also encourage you, if you have the wherewithal, and everybody does, don't think it's not a smart person thing, it's just you got to spend the time. It's like playing guitar. If you're good at guitar, it's not because you're good at guitar, it's because you practice, period. That's it. You know, and you practice more than most other people. And so that's what makes you good. So for plugin development, it just takes some practice. You probably got to learn some math, you know, a little bit of calculus, a little bit of engineering. These are all really doable. It's a marathon, not a race, and just to put the time into it, it'll be okay. And if you have a sound in your head that you know you like, that other people like too, that's probably the hardest part right there. Once you have that concept of what you want, the details they're in, yeah. So Juice, SDK, start there. Good luck, cross your fingers, take small steps. Right.
Awesome. So along those same lines, different question, but kind of along those same lines, I want to ask Dirk is, with the advancement of AI coming fast and furious, how long do you think it will be before AI allows people to make their own plugins with simple input into a user interface?
I'm not the biggest believer in AI. I mean, it depends on what you think AI is. I mean, there's two quotes that I really love. One is, there is no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. And then I talked to Mark Ithier, the founder of Isotope, recently, and he told me that there is no AI. It's basically computers that are matching humanly trained computers, basically is how he called it. So far, and maybe we'll get that, there is no brain inside a computer that could actually do what your brain and my brain and Colin's brain, of course, is very different, even what they all do, right? And I mean this in a positive way, you know this. But we are working on projects right now that try and mimic some of the behavior, just like other companies have done, and we have our own approach, and I guess everybody has their own approach. So I do believe that computers are really good in looking up big tables and seeing, oh, somebody tried this and it gave him this result. And so if I have this challenge here, maybe I should do a similar approach. I'm not sure if, I mean, it would be really hard to imagine some technology where somebody just dreams up a plugin basically, and all of a sudden the plugin is there. So I don't know how you would approach that. There's definitely some toolkits, and what Colin has developed, for example, a plugin, and one of our partners has it's called Biome, a modular plugin, basically, where you can combine so many processes. That's basically making a plugin. I mean, it's a preset in somebody else's plugin in this way, but if you have a really clever idea of how you split the frequencies into 3 bands, and then you distort the mids, and you compress the highs, and you route something back, and then you flange it all, and you go up to stereo, and you fold it back to mono, whatever you're doing. That's basically our approach when we're not modeling an analog compressor or something. We sometimes start by chaining some plugins together and playing with ideas. And so I guess there's no reason why there shouldn't be a toolkit maybe in the future where somebody's able to make plugins. I guess Reactor and some other things are already available. So if you're creative, maybe the creative part is the hardest part, because you have to have an idea to make a plugin.
Awesome. A couple of questions have come in, kind of asking both of you kind of what are some of your maybe possible future plans on surround and especially Dolby Atmos. Dirk, you have any thoughts on kind of where that might be heading with you guys over at Brainworx and Plugin Alliance?
Yeah, so one of the nice things with Plugin Alliance is that we don't have to do everything ourselves. We call it our DNA, and the Brainworx team has a certain DNA, and then there's other things that are so different than what we do and so complex also it would take years to look into it. So we're happy with the Plugin Alliance to be able to partner with a lot of different brands, and we have Dear Reality, which is Sennheiser has just invested in them, and they're building a lot of 360 and 3D audio solutions right now. It sounds really impressive. I mean, I am a stereo fan, I would say, but I've enjoyed watching movies in surround, and when they're really well mixed and made, it sounds impressive. And I've heard some sound examples and demos on headphones now with 3D and 360 that are really impressive. I like that technology. I'm open to new ideas. Personally, when I just have an hour to kill and I want to experiment, it's typically still in stereo. But I do believe this is where it's going. I mean, the video gaming and the movies, they almost demand it. And I think just for these media types, it's so much more rewarding if you have audio coming from anywhere, explosions in the back and dialogue in the front. And so it's an amazing field of audio, I think. We have plans to eventually merge our technology, our modeling technology, with some 360 technology from somebody else, maybe. So, because right now everything in 360 is very technical. I mean, it's digital EQs and digital limiters or whatever it is. It would be interesting to hear how an analog modeled SSL console in 3D would sound. And we haven't done this yet, but it's maybe something that could happen in the future. Stuff like, I'm not saying SSL now, but it's just an example. It could be a 3D bass amp.
Awesome. Colin, what are your thoughts on surround and Atmos in the future at McDSP?
Well, Atmos is a lot of channels and a lot of configurations and a lot of ways to put it together. I think Avid's done a pretty good job of wrestling that into something that works with Pro Tools, and that's pretty cool. I think that what we generally try to do for any Atmos stuff is if we can, it's kind of hard during the pandemic, which is a bummer, but for Atmos, a lot of it, you have to experience it there. You know, the client says, hey, I have this Atmos room and I want to do this thing. Let me show it to you. That's totally like a field trip to go check it out, which is a lot of fun. I think that as customers explore the surround sound formats, we'll just try to come up with some solutions for them. That's a pretty vague answer. I think, the most recent surround thing we did is we made a surround version of the limiter that comes with the APB box because somebody wanted to do surround limiting in all the formats. And we were like, okay, so we made one. But I think we'll probably just sort of see, like Dirk's saying, it's an evolving market, and as things develop, we'll try to complement or come up with new solutions that people need to get the job done.
Cool. And here's I think a really interesting question. And I know a lot of people will be interested in hearing what the answers from you guys are. So how do you guys determine when a plugin sounds good and is ready to be released? Is that a democratic process, or is there one set of ears, whether it be yours or somebody else's, that basically will determine when it's ready? Colin.
It's kind of democratic. I guess I'm still a person that sort of thumbs up stuff or thumbs down stuff. But even if we get a sound that we like in a product, no matter what it is, we'll have at least a part of the beta cycle is, giving it to people to go, hey, what do you think of this sound? And sometimes people are like, I think it's a little bit too much of this or too much of that. And sometimes people go, I like the way it sounds, but it sure would be great to have an additional control to do X, Y, or Z. And then we debate that. So it's a little bit democratic, a little bit of like, well, here's what you're going to get. And you can maybe move around a bit. There you go.
Dirk, what's your take on that?
Yeah, and in our universe, it really depends on the product. For example, when we work with licensing partners like MPEG or SSL, they usually want to have a saying in how their plugin sounds in the end. They want to make sure it's right. And so, for example, we work quite a bit back and forth with the SSL engineers in England when we modeled the 4K and the 9K consoles. And then internally, yes, we have a few product managers now who basically run these different plugin projects, like mini CEOs for their project, and they are the ears. And then they will sometimes send me stuff still, and I am an experienced listener, so obviously my voice has some impact in the company. And just like Colin said, when something is done, we will also send it to beta teams, and if somebody makes a valid creative proposal, we'll take a listen and take a look. We're usually not going back and forth very often because we take the planning serious internally. When we design our own thing, like for example, I don't know, BX Boomer, I designed the BX Master Desk plugin, for example. This was basically my ear saying, okay, this is how it should sound. I combined a lot of different other algorithms that were available and told the guys, look, some presets or some parameters have to be fixed like this and this and this, and others have to be adjustable. The whole chain worked at some point. I think so. Different approaches for different scenarios.
Awesome. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I want to thank both of you guys for being here and being able to really discuss a lot of these topics, and appreciate everybody that kind of tuned in as well to ask a bunch of great questions of these two really fine individuals, and super excited to hear what's coming next from both of you. So Greg, you got any last parting words for us?
Just to follow up, again, thank you all for being here. Make sure you can actually check us out now. If you want to replay any of the audio community plugins, you can find them at avidblogs.com. /audio-community-plugins. So you can check that out, guys. Again, thank you, Dirk. Thank you, Colin, and thank you, Gil. Everyone stay safe, and we'll see everyone next time.